Pod. Welcome back to another episode of Say Who, Say Pod. He's Danny O'Neil in a sports coat and a sweatshirt, rocking the Mike McDonald look today.
It's a fashion hoodie. Hoodie, Christian, and it's purple or eggplant.
I'm Christian Caple. The Washington Huskies are 4-1.
Woohoo!
Standard issue, regular old 24-20 win at Maryland. Hit the window, by the way. Hit the narrow window of a Washington win and a Maryland cover. I think it came down to 4.5 or 5.5 by kickoff, so not easy to do. I'm going to be very interested to hear about Danny's watching experience, because it was one that I think is extremely difficult to pull off in 2025. And you'll know.
It's less hard when you live on the East Coast.
Fair enough.
Less difficult when you live on the East Coast.
Before we do, of course, I'll let you know that today's episode of Say Who, Say Pod is brought to you by our good friends at Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline. Family owned and operated by a family of University of Washington grads. Locally owned and operated since when, Danny? 1964.
1964, just after the mythical national championship that we shouldn't claim but do.
It was still fresh in the minds of 18-year-olds had been 14 when they experienced their first national title, sort of. The friendly, low-pressure sales staff and a competitively priced selection of vehicles. We hope you'll make Chuck Olson Kia in Shoreline your next destination for all of your vehicle buying needs. If you do, ask for our friend Henry Olson, and if you talk to Henry, tell him Say Who, Say Pod sent you.
Say who? Say Pod.
Yes. Danny did not watch the game live on television. Danny recorded the game, time-capsuled it. I'm curious how you went about this. Did you go on Do Not Disturb? Did you tell people not to approach you? How'd you do it?
No, I will not tell anyone. Given my friends, and I will say I 100% deserve this, if I told most of my really good friends what I was doing, they would make efforts to ruin it for me, which totally fair. Our first New York friends are leaving the city, which is, if it's something of a rite of passage in New York once you've been here for a certain amount of time, because people do just leave the city. They kind of decide I've had enough, and there's like, I'm getting out. And two of our friends had their going away party. So we trundled over to Brooklyn, and I got back. Oh, it was probably about 6:30 or 7 when I got back and plopped my butt. So it was over. Yes, I think so. But it was going to be a touch and go scenario of whether it was over or not, and then watched it on, I don't even know what they call it now. I have YouTube TV, so I don't think it's DVR, but I had recorded it on it was in my library.
The unlimited cloud, the limitless cloud of YouTube TV. At any point, did you want to quit or fast forward?
No. One of the real benefits of doing the time capsule is that you can skip through the commercials, which when you're watching a stinker of a performance, the commercials are the most excruciating, because then you have to make yourself switch back. And no, I was committed to the long haul of it. I never interrupted it. The only change we did have is once the Mariners game started, I had a separate TV because you can't do picture in picture with a recorded event and a live event.
They got to fix that.
Yeah, so I had a separate TV that I brought out, a separate screen, not a full TV, but a separate screen, my backup computer monitor that I brought out, so I could have that set up to the live feed, watch the Mariners live as I was finishing the UW game recorded.
You can at least pick your picture in picture programs now, right? It used to be like a preset thing, like, oh, you can watch these 4 games at a time, or these 4 games, or these 2 games, but if you want to watch this one and this one, you can't customize it. You can at least customize it now, but they got it. Yes. They got to make the recording an option too.
Yeah, you can't mix live. It's like the 2 streams in Ghostbusters that can't cross. You can't do live and recorded at the same time. Otherwise, I think things will start smoking.
At what point did you believe there was even the slightest chance that they might actually win?
I didn't feel terrible about the game at halftime. I didn't think they were going to win, but I felt like there was I felt like they had a shot. If you would ask me to give their chances, I would have given them like a 25 to 30% chance of winning that game at halftime, the way things
Really?
stood. Yeah, because and the two factors that I would have pointed to of as much as Maryland is dominated, it's not that big of a lead. And they've been unsustainably good on third down. A lot of those are makeable third downs, and I don't want that to come across as they got lucky, but you're not going to consistently string together that many third down conversions. So I felt like things could change. Now, I didn't see how they would end up changing, which I don't think it had as much to do with Washington's third down defense as it did to Maryland's edge pass rushers just weren't the same. One of them was ejected and the other one was not the same player in the second half, probably because he twisted his ankle. But I was when they went down 20, I was like, yeah, okay, that's probably not going to happen. I still thought they'd come back and make it interesting, but it was I never fully gave up hope. I was mad, but I never fully got there's no chance they're coming back and winning this game.
So at halftime, I was thinking it was kind of reminding me, and if Washington were going to come back and win or make it a game, it was going to need to play out this way. Of the 2006 game against UCLA, where Dan Howell had the pick six
Oh yeah,
at Husky Stadium,
yeah.
UCLA got up 16-0 in that game in the first half. They were completely dominating, but that 16 is a 7 and 3 threes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're moving the ball like crazy and they're getting into scoring position, so to speak, but they're settling for field goals most of the time. And you think, there's no reason to think Washington's going to win this game. UCLA is completely outplaying them, but one touchdown is all they're going to need to get back in it. And UCLA is going to pay for having settled for so many field goals. And they score a touchdown right before halftime at 16-7 at halftime. And then I don't think Howell's pick six was I think the pick six either gave them the lead or expanded the lead. They won 29-19, and things just completely changed after halftime. The parallel here, and one thing I think I kind of overlooked in my coverage, was how huge it was for them to hold Maryland to a field goal after Deontae Williams Jr.'s interception in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they started that possession, they got a penalty at the tail end of the return, started that possession at the 14-yard line, right? So other than forcing a turnover or missing the kick, that's as good as you can do. Mikel Esteen goes up and intercepts a pass that Malik Washington probably shouldn't have thrown late in the first half. They don't get points off that, but it gave him a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I think the defense, I get that it's frustrating in the first half watching Maryland not really be all that efficient or explosive at all, but just converting third downs, getting 4 yards, getting 4 yards, getting 4 yards. Like I say, averaging 4 yards per play is not good at all. But if you get exactly 4 yards on every play, then you'll never punt. So I think it kind of, the fact that they were able to convert so many third downs, score that touchdown in the first half, and move the ball, sustain some drives a little bit, belied just how kind of inefficient they were. And I think on the whole, how tight and pretty decent Washington's defense was playing. And the final numbers bore that out. I mean, Maryland averaged 3.6 yards per play in the first half. And what was it, 4.2 for the game, or maybe 4 flat? You'll take that on the road against anybody, anytime.
Yes. And as someone who has covered a Pete Carroll defense for a long time, I have seen that sort of approach, which is don't get beat, don't give up big plays. The way you get beat, the quickest way to get beat is to give up big plays. And you make them make that play time after time after time, the check down, the short pass, and eventually your offense, if you have an explosive offense, will be able to catch up, will put some pressure on them, and pressure changes it. It becomes harder to execute under pressure. Like by making them accept, and look, they had 2 16-play drives in the first half. One resulted in a touchdown, the other one led to a field goal. But these are the reasons why when people cite the number of plays and time of possession, the single most important metric or measurement of an offense is efficiency. How efficient are you with your opportunities? And that goes for length of play and putting yourself in position to score. Expected points added, EPA, is the best measurement. How efficient are you? Maryland was great at controlling the ball. Not really that efficient and not that dangerous.
You mentioned EPA. I mean, success rate, and our guy Stats of War, Parker Fleming on Twitter. His did we really get beat that bad chart every week that measures the net success rate margins for each game. That's based, some people base, some metrics base success rate on like a certain percentage of yards gained on first, second, third, or fourth down. His is based on whether you had positive or negative EPA on any given play. So it's a little bit different, but Washington, it wasn't like an overwhelming margin, but it was a comfortable enough one that if they'd lost the game with that margin, you'd go, whoa, that's a pretty backwards result for a losing team. Washington's EPA per play in this game, this is per gameonpaper.com, which is a resource I cite a lot. If you read my site at onmonlake.com, finished in the 75th percentile in this game in EPA per play. Maryland finished 33rd. So that's not a game Washington should lose. And, part of why they were able to create that margin is because of the way that they played on their final 4 possessions and the way that Maryland played on its final 4 possessions. And that was the ball game. But, this was a team that it was the kind of game that if you're not going to beat Maryland in the Big Ten, who are you going to beat? Right. But it's on the road, East Coast. Maryland's coming off a bye. And I think there's reason to believe this Maryland team is a lot better than they were a year ago.
For sure.
They lost all that they lost in the transfer portal. We talked last week about Malik Washington. You saw some of his skills, but at the same time, like I thought they schemed him pretty good. Didn't really hurt them a ton. That drop pass on 3rd and 8 in the fourth quarter could have changed things a little bit. You could tell he really wanted that one.
Mm-hmm. Put it
but
right
at the same
where it
time,
needed to be too.
Yeah, just perfect throw. The same time, like you could tell he's very poised. I think already does a really good job playing within that system. As he progresses, I think you're going to see them put more and more and more on him, and he's really got a chance to be a star. Those edge rushers are dudes too. Zahir Mathis is like,
yeah.
If they can hold on to this freshman class they've got, they got a chance to like take a step back to being like a 7-8 win program, which they had been for several seasons before they went 4-8 last year. So that's a big athletic defense they have. I'm going to be very interested to see how they fare through the rest of Big Ten play, because I'm not surprised that they gave Washington some problems up front.
Now, Zahir Mathis, I'm going to be watching him going forward. He absolutely had his way on the edge against Washington's backup left tackle. That's just how it was. It's possible that a bigger, better left tackle, not bigger because McCree's huge, but might be able to use size to slow him down more than McCree was able to. But his mobility and the length he has, like he looks like a pretty devastating player. I was really impressed with him, and I want to give him credit because he stayed in the game after he got rolled up on by one of his teammates. It was on a tackle of Jonah Coleman. He stayed in the game, but I just think it was pretty clear he wasn't as devastating coming off the edge after that as he had been the first 2.5 quarters.
5 pressures, 3 hurries, a sack, and a quarterback hit for Zahir Mathis per PFF.
What did you think was going on with Damon?
He just seemed a little off.
For sure.
He talked, and Jed Fish talked about some of the coverage stuff that Maryland was doing, similar to Ohio State, Jed Fish said anyway, in that they were not going to let Denzel Boston beat them deep. I don't think they were giving Washington a ton of one-on-one looks with him outside, or maybe they're trying to disguise to show man coverage before the snap, but then rolling a safety over and effectively getting a double team on him. The reason I would put it more on like it was just kind of an off half by Damon Williams Jr. is how badly he missed that throw to Denzel Boston up the seam, to the point where like I figured, he must have been expecting him to break differently.
Yeah.
Jed Fish said it was not a miscommunication, that he just threw it behind him. It just maybe it slipped a little bit or whatever, but like that's not a throw he misses.
Yeah.
You know?
I have a couple working theories, and I'd be interested to hear your appraisal of my sort of from the couch theories. The first one is that interception really rattled him. And he's very conscientious about taking care of the ball. He's not someone that he's super accurate passer. We know this about he's not reckless even when he's running around, and he is someone who is very conscientious about protecting the ball, and that the interception rattled him and caused him to hold on to the ball a little bit more and maybe doubt himself a little bit. Like, I don't know, which is a hard thing for any quarterback, but we're still talking about a quarterback in his first full year as a starter, starting on the road against a team that has some momentum and believes in itself and sees this as a chance to have a sort of plant your flag game, and who has a couple of freaking demons coming off the edge against him. That he was rattled. That rattled him for the first half. The other question I had is that I think you've seen him have less room when he scrambles these past two games, and clearly Ohio State, some of that just comes down to the speed that they have, and the linebacker who was spying on him, who shouldn't be allowed to play linebacker given how fast he is. I think there should be just an exception. Like, he's too fast to play linebacker. He has to play further back from the line of scrimmage. And that caused him a little bit of indecision. Like, he didn't want to run. Then when he did run, there wasn't as much space to run, and it all kind of caved in on him. What do you think of my two theories? The one being he was rattled. The second one being the lack of room to run kind of made him feel a little more compressed or caged in.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with him being rattled. I think you could see him holding the ball a little bit, was a little more hesitant to let it rip. He's, like Jed Fish pointed out, he made that same throw 3 times against Ohio State, but it's a little different when you're a sophomore with only a handful of starts under your belt. I guess 7 now. But, maybe when you're a senior and you miss a throw like that, you're like, oh, I made that throw 100 times in games. It's nothing. Just shake it off, move on to the next play. But when you're still relatively earlier in your career and you're on the road and nothing else is going right, I could see, okay, now I really got to prioritize the ball. We really got to value possessions. I cannot throw another pick. Maybe some of the lack of room scrambling against Ohio State too influences those decisions, because I don't know if he was as squeezed in this game. It seemed like there were opportunities in the first half to take off, and it seemed like he took those opportunities in the second half and that they had 2 runs in this game longer than 10 yards.
Yep.
And they were both his.
Yep.
And one was the 20-yard scramble. That was a huge play to turn what could have been an incompletion into a big gain, moving the chains. And then the other was the 10-yard designed run on their final possession that allowed them to ice the clock. They didn't have to run the ball, by the way, on the next 2 plays. And I don't know how many people noticed or cared because nobody fumbled, but could have easily just snapped it and rolled out and slid, or taken a couple steps backward on the kneel down and not put the ball in harm's way in any way on those plays. But
I loved the design keeper. I thought that
was a great play.
I thought it was a pretty badass. And I'm not as big a fan of the speed option into the boundary, but like when you've got some ganas, when you've got some guts as a play caller like Jed Fish has, like that's the benefit you get. That's a pretty gutsy call. And I loved it. And it worked great.
They finally got Decker DeGraff involved. I think people had kind of been waiting on that. And really, I think as they get into the teeth of Big Ten play here, you're going to see more and more teams roll coverage to take Denzel Boston away. If I'm scheming against Washington, those of us out here, like, I think we've seen enough of Desmond Roebuck so far to know that, like, he's going to be a pretty good player. And
throw Vines Bright in there too.
Yeah.
Both of those true freshmen are players right now.
But if I'm scheming against Washington, I'm not looking at that receiver core and seeing a Romo Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, number 2 and 3, right?
For sure. There's one dude above and beyond. There's one dude you can say, we don't want this guy to beat us.
And I think if concern over Denzel Boston takes attention off of Desmond Roebuck or Raiden Vinesbright, I think Jedd Fisch could be just okay with that, because I think they really believe in those guys. And you saw Desmond Roebuck get a one-on-one opportunity in the fourth quarter, and Deontae Williams Jr. made a perfect throw. By the way, there's an end zone view of that play where you can see Roebuck running the route, and as he starts to track the ball, he speeds up and gets himself in the most efficient way possible to exactly where he needed to be to catch that ball in stride with a foot in bounds. That ball tracking ability and that just kind of natural feel for where exactly on the field do I need to get to maximize our yardage on this play. You either have that or you don't, and he's like that's what he's 5'10" and 180 pounds, and he doesn't run a 4.4, and he's never going to be a sub 11 100-meter guy. And all, like, what separates him, like that, and the fact that he catches everything.
Yeah.
But that sort of innate ability to track the ball and get to exactly where you need to get to in fluid motion and make the play. I think you're going to see a lot of that from him.
It was an impressive catch. You know what I think of every time he catches the ball, Christian? And this is credit to you or blame to you, however you want to say it. Every time he catches the ball, I'm like, really? Arizona didn't want him? Really? Like, they didn't just trip over themselves? Like, how do you let that guy get out of the state without laying down in front of the car? That dude's a baller. Like, he's a baller. Vinesbright is a baller. That the catch that Vinesbright had, I thought that might be one of the more pivotal plays. The third down catch, early in the second half, where he makes it, runs the route perfectly. It's an out route over toward the sticks. Deontae Williams makes. I thought that as much as anything, that was a turning point in how their offense executed. That on a critical third down play where they're really at a point where, okay, if you don't get something here, you're not going to have a chance to win this game. Like, it has to happen now. And maybe that was part of the breakthrough, where there's no more, okay, we're okay if we just score here. We don't need to press. We don't need. It's like, okay, dude, it's got to now or never. It's got to happen now. You've got to cut it loose. And that was a great connection those two made.
Vinesbright's big too. I mean, for a true freshman playing in the slot in Jedd Fisch's offense, like, he definitely presents a little bit of a different target than, Giles Jackson was good for them last year, had a good year, but you could see him maybe getting a little more done after the catch as he progresses in his career. Like, I think he's going to be that, stronger slot guy who's going to have a chance to break tackles, and be interested to see how they can maybe scheme up more opportunities for him too. I'm glad you mentioned the Arizona thing with Roebuck again, not to harp on it, but we talked about initially, like, well, he developed such a relationship with Jedd Fisch and Kevin Cummings, and when he left for Washington, was he just signed, sealed, delivered to go with that staff no matter what? I think they really wanted him, and I think if they'd really turned the pressure on in like a very competitive battle with multiple other schools, I wouldn't bet against Jedd Fisch to Washington landing Desmond Roebuck. But part of recruiting is not just throwing the towel in when you have a shot, right? And so I think as evidence of the fact that it was silly for the Arizona staff to not pursue him, who was the one other school pushing for him before signing day, Danny?
I don't know.
It was the Arizona State Sun Devils and Kenny Dillingham. So either your head coach is a relentless recruiter and doesn't take no for an answer and is never say never. Kenny Dillingham probably knew he was not going to get Desmond Roebuck away from Washington, but he saw the talent and wanted him and wasn't going to back off until there was no chance.
Yeah.
That's recruiting.
Yeah.
And so if you're the head coach in Tucson and you don't even initiate contact with Desmond Roebuck after you take the job, either outcome is non-optimal. If I'm an Arizona fan, either you looked at Desmond Roebuck and thought, nah, we don't want him, or you looked at Desmond Roebuck and thought, yeah, he's a good player, but Jedd Fisch is all over him, and I don't know, it's probably not worth our time. Like, I don't like either one of those if I'm an Arizona fan.
I would definitely say he would have to be the kind of player where You're going to have to tell me no 500 times. And even then, I'm still going to ask you because you're the kind of player I want. Those are the kind of football players you want on a college football team. And that's especially true if you're a team like, quite frankly, Washington is in the Big Ten and Arizona is, where you're not going to win. You're not going to have the highest rated recruiting classes in your respective conferences. It's going to be about getting guys who have a competitiveness and a fire about them, about the way they play, as opposed to just raw stars on your recruiting profile.
What was the most negative thought you had watching this game? Like how bad did it get for you mentally, and at what point?
The worst point was, oh man, I don't know how you come out of that game against Ohio State feeling that there's progress and look at how they played in the first half here and think that it was actually progress. Like that's really what it came, was, oh, I thought this team was beyond laying a stinker like this, because it felt like Maryland on offense wasn't doing anything extraordinary, and Washington was just feeble on offense. Like that offense looked bad, and it felt like anything that you thought you saw in the Ohio State game was a product of Ohio State being conservative as opposed to Washington having shown progress. So I would say that was one of the worst halves, just in terms of competitiveness, from a Washington team that I'd seen since the Ty Willingham era. Like that, where really I just felt that they were off, and just it was feeble. Like that offense didn't do anything. And that part surprised me. And to their credit, like they came and flipped it around, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. And I think that those sort of moments are really important for teams, because it forces you, when things, can you get out of a slump? Like this was one of the interesting it was the farm director for the Mariners. He talked about everybody goes into slumps. It's a part of baseball. You have to do it. Getting out of a slump, like that's a skill. Avoiding a slump, you can't do that in baseball. Like you're going to have that. But getting out of a slump, that is something you can get better at. That is something you can learn to do. And for Washington in this game, like that goes a long way toward sort of the experience, the confidence that comes with, hey, we took a game that was headed in one direction, we planted our foot, we pushed back, and we got it over the hump. Like it was a really meaningful result in that way. The positives of the comeback, to me, clearly outweigh the negatives of a 2-quarter no-show on the part of the offense.
I mentioned this in my story, but like, I don't know that I've ever seen a comeback like that was not sparked by one big, like massive EPA play, for example. Like it's 20 to, you kick the field goal, it's 20-3, and then you get a pick six on the next play from scrimmage, and boom, it's 20-10, and you're right back in it, and that immediately your sideline's going nuts, and you decidedly have the momentum. Everyone on Maryland's side is thinking, oh my God, here we go again. We're going to collapse. We're going to be September Maryland. For them to fall behind by 20 points and then just go field goal, touchdown, and hold Maryland to punt, turnover on downs. Like, I don't know how many 3-score third quarter comebacks go that way without a punt return for a touchdown, or block punt for a touchdown, or a turnover deep in their end, or whatever. Like, I know I've said this before, but to me, that's what made it most remarkable. And like, obviously there were things that broke in Washington's way, right? You got to catch breaks along the way. Zahir Mathis not being 100% throughout the fourth quarter, Sidney Stewart getting ejected late in the first half to really take some heat off the pass rush. The big drop on third down there in the fourth quarter by Maryland. But also, like, you saw this throughout like the Mike Leach era at Washington State. This is the downside to not being able to run the ball, is when you get up 20-0, 20-3, and you don't feel like you can lean on your running game at all. They ran the ball 4 times in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
They were up 13-0 at halftime and 20-3 the next time they got the ball back, and didn't run the ball. And I don't think it's because it just didn't occur to them that they should do that. I think it's because they're not a good running team. They didn't have the confidence that they could lean on that aspect of their game. And, you know, Jed Fish would point to that probably. Like if Washington felt that way, Jed Fish would point to that as something they need to clear up because you're not going to win games in the Big Ten doing that in particular. So not having like a really reliable running game, I think really hurt Maryland too. And, there was so I wrote that the taunting penalty on Maryland was among the worst I'd ever seen.
It was,
But folks pointed out, and rightfully so, that there'd been, I think, some warnings issued by the officiating crew to Maryland's defense in particular about taunting and talking and all those sort of things. So it might have been like a lifetime achievement award rather than just a one-off, like, hey, this individual thing in a vacuum is not okay.
Is it? What is that celebration? I always refer to it as the seatbelt, but I don't think it is. Was it like sheathing a sword, like putting the sword back in the hilt?
It is a seatbelt. So I got this wrong. Devon Banks did it. You remember Devon Banks had that huge game against Boise State in 2023, had 4 pass breakups, almost had an interception.
Yes.
Now plays for Boise State, by the way. He did it after a big pass breakup. And I did a feature on him that week, and I think I described it as like a sword sheathing maneuver.
Uh-huh.
And someone at Washington a couple of days later was like, "Oh, by the way, like that celebration is like it's a seatbelt. It's like I'm
wrapping you up.
Yeah, put you in the car seat and put the seatbelt on you. Like you're not going anywhere." So you see that, like, my thing is, even if they'd been warned a bunch or they're doing a bunch of trash talking, whatever, like he wasn't standing over him. He was yards away from him. Is there going to be a college football game across the country on a given Saturday where someone doesn't do that celebration? I thought it was weak.
I thought it was a very weak call too. It also, was it on second down? Was it after a second down play? And
it was on first down.
Right.
First and goal from the 7 becomes.
And then it was first and goal from the 3.
Yeah. Instead of second and goal from the 7. Like it wasn't a huge impact penalty. I just thought it was lame.
I thought it was a lame call. But beyond that, I mean, mostly it was their offense. I think after Washington's comeback started, is it like 5 first downs that they got? They had 2 straight 3-and-outs where they just ran 3 plays and had to punt. And then they had 2 drives were 6 and 7 plays after that. They didn't have any offense to go to. And some of that is that when you rely upon consistently stringing together third downs, that becomes tough. And not only that, when you apply pressure, like you make the other team come through in those moments, and that becomes a challenge. Can you sustain it? Are you able to do it? Maryland was in position to convert that third down on the pass that was lobbed. It didn't happen. And that's part of the make them execute in big moments. So I thought the penalty was lame. I'm not sure how much that had to do with the outcome. Maryland, if they were going to win that game, needed to have built a bigger lead when Washington was busy doing nothing. And instead, they really couldn't. And maybe that's like Washington's defense deserves some credit there by, hey, we're not going to give up any big plays. We're going to make them slowly and incrementally earn it. And yeah, they're going to have 13 points at halftime, and they're going to score a touchdown on early in the second half, and we're still going to be in it. It's going to be a 3-score game at that point.
21 first downs for Washington in the second half, to your point. 7 for Maryland. Maryland had 18 first downs in this game. You know how many first downs rushing they had?
Ooh. I can't think of one. So I'll guess 1.
There were 2.
Jeez.
So and Pep Hamilton is their offensive coordinator. Obviously very experienced, long track record there. They throw a lot of short passes, right? They throw a lot of quick passes. That has long been an extension of the running game in college football. And I think Malik Washington he handles that well, right? Like I don't know if that's exactly how they want to play or if that's we have a true freshman quarterback. And so let's simplify things, / we also can't really run the ball. And so this is going to be how we're going to kind of get this incremental yardage on early downs. It's just such a wild second half box score for a game that was 20-0. They outgained them in the second half, 290 to 127. 21 first downs to 7 first downs. Washington's 4 of 6 on third down. Maryland's 2 of 6 and 0 for 1 on fourth down. Washington runs 44 plays to Maryland's 28. They possess the ball almost twice as long, which is not always an indicator of success. In this game, I think it was, because when you're up 20-3, possessing the ball is good. Even if it doesn't end in points, that's sort of a win in itself, and Maryland couldn't do that. So, I'm not sure I've ever covered another Washington game where you went from thinking this is the worst result of this head coach's tenure to this is probably the most encouraging thing this team has done since Jed Fish got to Washington. Am I wrong?
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that because I did come away feeling like, okay, yeah, man, Jed's got a backbone and his team's tough. No, I think that's accurate. The other games that flipped, the UCLA game was a good call because I wouldn't have remembered that, but that totally. I was thinking of the Arizona game, the Mason Foster pick return against Arizona. It was a night game, and that's Sark, right?
Yes, that was his first year, 2009.
But Sark's signature moment that year was the USC victory. So
and
no,
giving up a Hail Mary to Arizona State where they got a receiver completely behind their secondary in Tempe.
Yeah, that was weird. Things happen in the desert, man. No, I would agree with you. I think that's a very accurate call of feeling like, man, he did not have this. They're just not ready to go. And whatever you thought you saw last week against Ohio State, this is a team that's going to scuffle. They're probably going to win 7 games. Like that was how I felt very much at the end of the first half, or at the very least when Maryland scored to go up 20-0. That's how I felt. It's like this is a team that is going to have to hustle to win 7 games, and instead came away feeling like they should be really proud of the way they played in that game. Like that showed a lot of toughness, and that is going to be one for a young team that will be a very important game.
Still some injury concerns. Carver Willis was wearing a large brace on his right leg at this game. He did travel.
Yeah, he traveled. That made me encouraged. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't think there was any chance he was going to play.
No. But that's a long flight. And maybe this is how I've always been accustomed to. If a guy with an injury doesn't need to fly, he shouldn't fly. So I kind of took that almost as a positive sign, but then I was like, I have no idea what it means.
Yeah, I don't really know. I asked Jed Fish yesterday about like Willis and Durfee in particular. Like, do you think are these long-term injuries? And he said that they don't have an indication right now that they should be too long-term, which,
I think that I think that means we might see them before the year's over.
It's hard to. It's very hard to say.
They have not ruled them out for a potential return in the bowl game.
I'll say this. I think I said as much the week of the Ohio State game. It's not about the words on paper, but about the vibe. I did not get the vibe from Jed Fish or Ryan Walters that they were expecting Takario Davis to play against Ohio State, and he didn't. Just the way they were talking about it, the way they were talking about other guys who were going to have to play if he didn't play, Dylan Robinson in particular. I just thought, like, man, typically you'd think he's going to do everything he can to play in this game in particular, but the way these guys are talking about him, it's not pointing to him playing to me. He made the trip too, worked out before the game. They're just trying to protect that rib. That can be a tricky thing, and they're all different. We don't know if he broke it, if he cracked it, if it's just a rib or what. I don't know. Who knows? But I will say, I'd say all that to say, the way they're talking about him now does seem a little more genuinely optimistic. Like, I think they really truly do believe he's close. And so this would be the first week where I wouldn't be surprised to see him play. I wasn't certain he was out against Ohio State. I wasn't certain he was out against Maryland, but I would have been surprised to see him in either of those games. I'm not certain one way or the other this week, but the way they're talking about him has got me now at a place where if he does play, I won't be surprised. I still, that. So you're welcome for the clarity on that situation.
What we're going to do is we're going to make a meter, and it's going to have your head, Christian, and we're going to put it on it'll be the Christian surprise meter. And I'm going to have you take like 5 or 6 different pictures. They'll be like emoji versions of Christian about how surprised he would be if so-and-so plays. And this week it would be, what I'm getting is like maybe a slightly like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Like, oh, yeah. All right.
Whereas if he'd played against Ohio State, it would have been.
Yeah, it would have been that, and it would have been, okay, they're a little bit more savvy at this gamesmanship thing than I thought.
They're cagey. There's some gamesmanship going on.
Fish all but conceded on Monday that Carver Willis won't be playing this week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a short week too, so that doesn't help. Durfee, to my knowledge, did not make the trip to Maryland. It's always hard to say someone wasn't there when there's 100 plus people in their traveling party, and like, did you lay eyes on every single one? But Carver Willis and Takario Davis and Javon Parker were very prominently there, and saw them, and in the mix and the celebration. I got to imagine if Durfee had been there, he would have been doing the same. So don't know. They don't think it's too long term, but I'll say this on the surprise meter. I would be surprised to see him play on Friday against Rutgers, but what the hell do I know? They do think they're getting Javon Parker back this week. We'll see where he fits into the D-line rotation. I think they feel a lot better about the available bodies there, and they don't necessarily, like, I'd be pretty surprised if he goes out and plays 25 snaps in his first game back. I think they can afford to maybe ease him into things a bit. And I think it would also just be meaningful for him to get on the field against Rutgers in particular, because that's who he got hurt against last year. And so, what better way to make your season debut coming back from that Achilles injury? I guess he had a knee thing too. Fish said it wasn't just one thing, but maybe there's some symbolism there for him to enjoy if he can get on the field and feel good for at least a few snaps. And they also think that Zadrius Rainey-Sale, the star freshman linebacker, is going to be available. I don't know.
He was in uniform. Has he been in uniform before?
He's been in uniform, yeah. So him and Manu suited up for like 2 or 3 games before Manu came back.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't on the exact same timeline. Manu's ACL was like a month before Rainey-Sale's. But he's been practicing, and I'm very curious to see, like, if he goes out and plays double-digit snaps at linebacker, that will be quite the statement about their belief in his future. If as a true freshman coming off an ACL injury in game 6, they're immediately throwing him into the rotation. So, we'll see there. I kind of think it's get your feet wet on special teams a bit and maybe mix him in at linebacker, give him a look, see how he can help you. But I don't know, maybe they've seen something in practice, and Ryan Walters talked about his football IQ, how impressive he is. And I think kind of like Jacob Manu, he's not, he's the kind of guy who impresses people just by sort of how he carries himself, like off the field. He's an energy guy. I think he's got some like natural leadership skills. Brian Odom, their linebackers coach, talked about how, in the spring, he's like, I haven't seen him do any football stuff yet, but boy, you can't miss him when he walks in a room. He's the kind of guy who just lights up a room, and very self-assured, very confident, plays like it. So I think that their defense could use some of that edge too. Again, true freshman coming off an ACL injury in game 6 of the season. I don't know how much you should expect him to play at linebacker in particular, but you could also get him a little bit of action this week. Build reps. We'll see what they do with Jacob Manu and the redshirt situation. He's played 2 games now. He's got 2 left. If they want to preserve it, might just see him let it go and play the whole year and hope that he can get an extra year back at the end because they changed the eligibility thing or whatever. But Zadrius Rainey-Saleh is, if not this year, and maybe this year, but if not this year, I think you're looking for something from him to get folks excited about what he can be as a sophomore and going forward.
So this is a question that cannot be asked of anyone that's associated or affiliated with the team, but it occurred to me watching Manu play. Clearly, snaps somewhat limited still on Saturday, though like he looked really good, and him blowing up that screen was one of the more devastating plays. Seeing Rainey-Saleh in uniform, which I had not noticed before, and thinking to myself, man, they're really developing, depending on how many guys they keep next year. Like, this could be a team that is really ready to pop a year from now. Does that ever enter your mind when you look at how the roster's made up and where guys are and maybe some of the bare spots on the roster? Because clearly, especially after the injury to Alupta, middle linebacker was a spot that's missing, and they're a little light on the defensive line, though Javon Parker coming back, that you really feel like if, depending on how many guys they retain, that this could be a team that is primed to pop a year from now.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff has been pointing to year 3.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks have been pointing to the Big Ten schedule in year 3 since it was released before last season. And it's, I will say, like, Nebraska and USC are both on it. So, like, those are 2 programs that could maybe be seen as making a move a little bit this year, and we'll see. You know, no one really trusts Lincoln Riley.
I'll say that on Nebraska. Nebraska looks, even though they've got the crazy quarterback, I don't know about USC. They got Michigan this week.
They've got Penn State coming to Seattle, but they'll be a different team than they are this year. And how good are they this year?
What happens when Penn State comes to the West Coast?
So they do play at Autzen. It's not an easy schedule, and it could look, I think, a lot more difficult by the time it rolls around. But point being, like, year 3's kind of been circled a little bit. Damon Williams Jr. will be a junior. Yeah. Adam Mohammed is right there to take over for Jonah Coleman at running back. They really like these young receivers, though they'll be replacing Denzel Boston. Decker DeGraff will be a junior. John Mills will be a sophomore. Landon Hatchett will be a senior. Drew Azzopardi will be a senior. I think you're going to expect true freshmen like Derek Coleman-Brusa to be involved. Maybe Cody Green, their 5-star offensive tackle commit, gets involved. Brian Bonner, 4-star running back recruit, who we talked about being one of their best running back recruits of the internet era. Maybe he's able to help out right away. So, you know, I think they return some guys on the interior D-line who can help them. I would imagine that they'll target that position in the portal again. That's kind of the one spot where they haven't built the depth through the 25 and 26 recruiting classes. You've got another year of Alex McLaughlin. Mm-hmm. Rylan Dillard-Allen will be a sophomore. Dylan Robinson will be a sophomore. Zadrius Rainey-Saleh will be either a redshirt freshman or a sophomore. I imagine they're not going to bother redshirting him even halfway through the year. He's not a 5-year player. There's a lot to like. It's a young core, and I think I've heard some people kind of compare this team to Chris Peterson's 2015 team, where Jake Browning and Trey Adams and Myles Gaskin are starting at critical offensive positions as true freshmen. Yeah. Budda Baker and Sidney Jones are sophomores. Azim Victor and Keyshawn Bierria are starting at linebacker for the first time. You're seeing what you've got in Elijah Qualls and Greg Gaines and Vita Vea. And, you know, is this a core that's going to go on to win its league and you know, be one of the top 4 teams in the country next year? I don't know about that, but I do think you're kind of seeing flashes of young talent that does sort of point to next year having some real potential. And, you know, the biggest piece of that is having Damon Williams Jr., right? Like having the quarterback figured out and assuming he continues to progress and impress through the rest of this year. Yeah, the way that people were talking about Illinois coming into this year, like, I think that could be Washington next year.
No,
depending on how it plays out.
We don't want any of the bad juju of the overhyped.
No. We're not talking about results.
Overpromise, underdeliver.
We're not talking about results. We're not talking about outcomes. Yeah. We're not talking about reality. We're talking about the attention economy.
Yeah, there we go.
I do think they will be positioned to be heavily featured in the attention economy going into next season.
They're
And
going to have
however it plays out, it plays out.
They're going to have a lot of the technical term for that is buzz.
Buzz.
They'll have a lot of
Hype.
buzz coming into next year.
What's old Buzz McFarland got for us?
Oh, Ian McFarland. I don't know. I wonder if his nickname, if he's ever been called Buzz. Could you see that? Buzz McFarland? Buzz McFarland, our conversation with IP McFarland from ipmcfarland.com.
That was about how we drew it up, right? I mean, go on the road, get a 24-20 win against a solid team. You know, throw for a couple touchdowns, run for one. I mean, like, this is what we were looking for. We don't need to dwell on the fact that I shut off a UW game in the second quarter for the first time in my life and rejoined my wife on the little vacation we were on by the pool. You know, I mean, if we are going to dwell on it, the hero of the weekend is Patrick, the LSU fan by the pool that started speaking with me and called me a word that I don't know if we say on Say Who Say Pod for not watching my team. So I did get back to the room and see the end of that. At the risk of saying another word, I think this word's okay on Say Who Say Pod, but at the risk of that, my question this week, is this team a little light in the ass? I love the skill positions. I thought the comeback was really exciting, and I think they have it. I don't think they have much chance against Oregon, but I think they have a chance against every other team on their schedule. But as the injuries continue to pile up, as the gauntlet of Big Ten bruising schedules continues, is the slim nature of the posteriors of UW's big people going to be a problem. I apologize about the recent sound quality. My new mic is on order. So you can see this ugly mug with slightly better sound quality going forward. Be good. Go Dogs.
Yeah, they're a little light. And maybe it's not light because it's not weight, but I would say that their defensive line, their defensive line is not as strong as maybe even your average Big Ten defensive line. That would be my impression. But I thought that the issue that you saw, I thought the issue you saw on Saturday, especially in the first half, was just coming around the edge. And Maryland's got a couple of pretty dynamic edge rushers. And on the left side with the backup left tackle, Washington it was clearly outmatched there.
Yeah, I mean, they've certainly gotten bigger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny that Jed Fish talks about getting bigger and looking at Maryland's defense, and, you know, that's what the Big Ten looks like. It's, you know, long, strong athletes everywhere. I think Washington has that in the secondary.
For sure.
Even with Takario Davis out, because Dylan Robinson is huge too.
Yep.
Alex McLaughlin's a bit slight, but he's 6'2".
That dude is a tackler.
And he hits, right?
I love him.
Him and Ryland Dillard Allen together next year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of that's like a potential enforcer back end that they haven't had in a while. But like a linebacker, you know, Buda Alukta, Devin Bryan, and Jacob Manu are all on the smaller side. They're not the big, long athletes that you probably would target out of high school. But, you know, neither is Desmond Roebuck, right? And so, like, when you see certain traits, then you're okay taking it on. But yeah, like they don't have a ton of size up front. It's been, you know, their two biggest defensive linemen, Samote Pepa and Logan Sagapalu, who play pretty much exclusively nose tackle in 5-down fronts. have not gotten on the field a ton. I think Sagapolu was dealing with an injury. He basically isn't part of the rotation, and Peppa is playing like 7 to 10 snaps. Maybe he played a little more against Ohio State. Bryce Butler's 6'5" and 320.
Yep.
I think the Parker twins are both pretty good size. They don't have, Ontario Thompson, I think is not the heaviest, but like you look at that guy and don't think he's undersized, right? They don't have the big, long, 6'4", crazy nimble at 330 pounds or whatever, just these high level early round NFL draft prospects like Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia seem to churn out every year.
Throw Michigan in there too.
Yeah.
And then Oregon's edge rushers are insane. Oregon has some incredible talent at edge rush. But yeah, I think what you said is accurate. Washington is not threatening to be among the 3 most dominant defensive lines. It's not an inadequate line either, though. Like, it's not their defense is more formidable than it was last year.
Yeah, and I think the biggest upgrade is just not having too precipitous of a drop off between number 1 and number 5 in the interior D-line rotation. It's not that you'd put 1 through 3 up against anybody in the league, but you feel pretty good about rolling your 4th and 5th guys through there for whatever duty is needed. And I think that helps 1 through 3 play better. And, I look, Sebastian Valdez is proving to be a pretty good football player, right?
Yeah.
And so they put a lot on him last year. They didn't have like a ton of talent around him up front. And so that changes things. But you go from Sebastian Valdez, Jacob Bandis, and gosh, who played the 3rd most snaps for them on the interior last year? It wasn't Alenius Davis. Someone like Alenius Davis has made a move.
Yeah, it changed so much because Parker got hurt. Well, Parker got hurt at Rutgers.
Right. Like Javon Parker was their best guy for at least for that game. He was literally like just starting to emerge as maybe their very best interior D lineman when they lost him. So, but look, you went from, oh my gosh, like this team is completely different without Javon Parker. Wow, that's a huge loss. To opening this season without him. And now looking at the rotation, and he's not going to step right into the starting lineup. I don't think he's going to play snaps over Alenius Davis. And so you basically have 3 starters there: Ontario Thompson, Taitai Uyunglele, and Alenius Davis, who played like equal snaps against Maryland, even though, they largely have been in 4-man fronts, at least in terms of the D-line and edge personnel they put on the field. And so a lot of times it's just 2 of those guys. Davis has started here and there. Bryce Butler was the first out there for at least 1 game. I think it's a good problem to have where you're looking at it and thinking, where does Javon Parker fit in the pecking order? Because you would have ended last year thinking he's got a chance to be number 1 going into 2025. And I don't know that he takes snaps away from, unless you're just trying to lighten the load for everybody, away from Uyunglele, Thompson, or Alenius Davis, who I think is playing well. So, that's 1 more body. You're going to have Javon and Armon playing together for the first time. Maybe they can actually get those guys on the field together for the first time. That'd be cool in year 4 for both of them. So this is as healthy and as deep as they've been on the interior D-line for quite a while. Like, look at how different they were without Tuli Latuli-Nasanoa in 2023.
Yeah.
They didn't have the depth then either, and they played for a national championship.
He was dealing with that the whole year. Like I would say that last year the lack of depth the lack of depth along the defensive line made Washington uncompetitive in multiple games, and that's not happening this year. And that against Maryland didn't push them around. Like Maryland basically just chipped away on their defense, but it wasn't like they were blowing Washington off the ball. It wasn't like their offense was able to do whatever it wanted. It was sort of a drip attack that eventually they shut the faucet off. But yeah, in general, they definitely could get stronger. But you've seen market improvement there.
Yeah, I think they are what they are this year, and the arrow is pointing up.
I think that's fair.
I think there's some thought that Derek Coleman-Brusa becomes an interior player once he gets to Washington. They're signing. Yeah, I mean, I think he can he's the sort of athlete who can do it all.
Mm-hmm.
But
if
he can give you those pass rush skills playing in the middle instead of on the edge, and if you feel like he can get enough else from some of the edge rushers you have in the program, then I think that's probably the path. But you never know, right? Like I feel like it's said about every high level edge prospect at some point that like, oh well, but he's got the frame, he could grow into a 3-tack or whatever.
It's even harder to project at Washington with Ryan Walters because of the fronts he uses. I mean, you see 5-man fronts. It is hard to project exactly what they're doing. But yeah, you do hear it about every elite level pass rusher. They're like, he could put on some weight and be inside, because every defensive coordinator is like, man, if you can get somebody like Aaron Donald, you see what that guy does to people. You don't know how it's going to work out. In large part because those guys are never going against people that are stronger than them when they're in high school.
Fair to assume that Oregon remains number 1.
Yes, in our Pac-12 power rankings, no shakeup at the top. Although we do have a showdown this week. It's very interesting, the tiers of the Pac-12. We have Oregon at the top. Then we have 4 teams that are 4-1. Arizona State, USC, Washington, and Utah. Some of this will sort itself out this week because Utah and Arizona State. How do you rank those 4? ASU, USC, Washington, Utah.
Yeah, I had that order last week, I believe.
I did too. I'm vaulting Washington ahead of USC. Partly because of Lincoln Riley's whining, and partly because I want to give Washington credit for going on the road and beating Maryland.
Washington did do what USC could not do last year, which is win at Maryland. I'm gonna keep the same order, 2 through 5.
Then we've got, well, actually there's 5, because 5 4-1 teams, and then there's Arizona. Arizona is the ranked 6th, I think, very clearly in the conference. They are not in the conversation with those teams above them. They just drubbed Oklahoma State, who is one of the worst programs in the country this year.
Yeah, incredible how far they've fallen, but we knew that already.
Cal next at 4-2. Is Cal 7th?
I think so. They got smacked by Duke at home.
Beat down by Duke.
But I mean, obviously not Oregon State or UCLA, despite their shocking.
Yeah, how far does
UCLA win over
up?
Penn State? Not Wazoo. Colorado's.
I go Colorado 2-4. They lost to TCU, but it was respectable.
Yeah, on the road, another fourth quarter got away from them. Yeah, so I'll go Cal 7 and Colorado 8.
Then we've got a choice between Stanford and Wazoo. Stanford 2-3. They just edged out San Jose State 30-29. Cougs had a bye. They are 3-2.
I think did I have Wazoo ahead of Colorado last week?
Well, I don't know.
I might have. I'm comfortable with Wazoo ahead of Stanford.
Okay. I would agree with that. And then now we've got the choice between UCLA, Oregon State. UCLA's got to. Does UCLA vault ahead of Stanford?
I think so.
I think
so.
I read that this was the first time in like 40 years that a top 10 team had lost to a team that was 0-4 or worse. Essentially meaning, which isn't a great, because it could be 1-7 and that wouldn't qualify for that. But a team that had played more than 4 games and gone winless, it's the first time a top 10 team had lost to one of those.
I can't think of a more surprising upset than Cal losing like it did to San Diego State was not shocking for the fact that San Diego State beat Cal.
Yeah, it's Cal.
But the margin was crazy. I could not possibly have predicted that margin.
Okay.
UCLA beating Penn State and scoring 42 points.
I mean,
is
UCLA,
insanity.
I thought UCLA was going to go 0-12. And
Yeah.
that's the Penn State team that has been building toward a national championship. They just gone to overtime with Oregon. Felt like, oh, that's a team you're going to see again. And then they go out and lose at UCLA. And now people are talking about James Franklin. Like, if he loses again, they're probably not getting in the playoff, and he might be cooked, even though he's got a $50 million buyout.
Every national writer together in unison after that game had the same take of Penn State and James Franklin should work out a mutual separation and he should take another job somewhere.
So funny. Is that because people just that James Franklin annoys people?
Boy, they sure don't like him in Maryland. No, I mean, I think he does a little bit, but I think it's just, look, you already have been dragging around this reputation that you can't win the big one. That's been well earned. You're coming off of not winning the big one at home, whiteout night against a top Big Ten team, another chance for a big win. You don't get it. And then you go lose at UCLA. Like, if they'd won that game 52-10, people would still be annoyed about the Oregon loss.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, look, it's been a long time. You haven't gotten over the hump. This is a really good program that wins a ton, that is the envy of most of FBS. But, you just can't get over that, can't get past that, like, can't beat good teams thing. And even last year, going to the playoff, and they didn't really have to beat anybody to get where they got last year. So I could see how people there can get to a point where let's see what someone else can do. We know what the ceiling is with James Franklin, and it's not good enough. And I could see whoever they hire to replace him not coming anywhere near winning as many games as he has there. Sorry, Oregon State.
Beavs
Maybe next week.
Lose to Appalachian State. Ooh, that one was tough. Did you see, last thing from me, did you see Sark's quote?
I didn't, no.
Sark was being grilled about it. He asked what? There's 136 teams in the country. You see how many of them would fare if they go on the road to play at Ohio State and then play at Florida? It's like totally unreasonable to expect a team that was ranked number 1 in the preseason to go play and win at 1-3 Florida.
That's not what folks want to hear from the head coach at the University of Texas.
Joel Anderson, who he played at TCU. He was a running back at TCU. I believe was once the fastest 10-year-old in the country. Maybe it was 12 years old. Some point in his grade school. He now works at the Ringer. He has the thing he uses called LOL Longhorns. When Texas does something that he deems embarrassing, and that was an LOL Longhorns.
I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into Rutgers later this week, Thursday, I guess, short week. But this is a top 30 passing offense in college football this year in both yards per attempt and efficiency. Ethan Kaliakmanis putting up a lot better numbers than he did last year. They are on a 2-game losing streak, having lost to Iowa and Minnesota, and they were off last week, the third of 3 consecutive opponents Washington's facing with that team coming off of a bye. Before we get going, silver lining to Washington's 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff at Michigan on October 18th. Michigan plays at USC at 4:30 Pacific time this coming Saturday. So Washington will finish its game against Rutgers at about 9 p.m. Friday, give or take, at home. Michigan will arrive back in Ann Arbor, I figure at like 7 a.m. Sunday or something like that, after a 7:30 p.m. Eastern time kick in Los Angeles. So you get not just an extra day of prep going to play at Michigan, though it is a 9 a.m. kick. You get some additional hours because of the long trip back home after what is an East Coast night game on the West Coast for Michigan. So if you're looking for little advantages or disadvantages, just pointing that out.
Feel good about it. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the Friday game. Looking forward to seeing how they fare at Michigan. That was last week I said I thought the Michigan game might be the most important of the season, and I hope that is true. I hope that it is the most important game for them.
I think they're about 9.5-point favorites against Rutgers this week. This is maybe even more so than Maryland. This is where like the extra week for Rutgers to prepare could show up because Washington's coming back from the East Coast on a short week. Granted, it was, they get time back coming home, and it was a 12:30 Pacific time kickoff, but they're beat up. It took a lot, maybe had a large emotional expenditure to win that Maryland game, and now you got to turn around and play on a Friday. Are playing at home, but I think this will be another challenge to get them up and get them ready to play.
It's so much easier when you have the second half they had, though. It's so much like if compared to reversing it, what it would feel like. It's so much easier to feel that all of those things are not eliminated, but you do get the benefit of feeling like, man, we figured it out mid-game, and we've got this thing turned in the right direction right now. I am optimistic about this game. I feel good about where they're headed.
Thanks to everybody listening everywhere.